Is it just me? Or is it getting crazier out there?
I just love bad guys. It's fun to say, well, why is he like that? What made him like that? And that's ultimately really what the goal of the movie. It's not this gigantic statement on the world today. And there is stuff thematically in there, but really it's like, what makes somebody that way? And the Joker, I just liked his sense of mayhem and chaos.
Todd called me and he said, I have this crazy idea for this sort of alternate version of DC. And the first one is the origin story of Joker. I thought, this is just so bold.
This is exactly how I imagined it. Todd has a very unique way of looking at things. And nobody could have made this movie but Todd.
I have never really thought about doing a comic book movie. For me, it was more about this idea of doing a character study, but about somebody people have no idea who, what, where he came from or anything like that. So it kind of came at it that way. It wasn't like, oh, I want to make a Joker movie. It was really came from like, how do you make a great character study and get people to want to see it? Warner's was pretty loose with it. I pitched it to them as an idea first, and they just said, okay, go explore it. I met with some people at DC, and then we went off and wrote it. Scott Silver and I wrote for really a year and came back with the script, but there was no rules or mandates from them.
How's the comedy career? You famous stand-up yet?
We really departed from a lot of the comic book things. We made up a new character.
Arthur Fleck, y'all.
We gave him this name, and we chose it out of the blue, so to speak. And maybe to the chagrin of true comic book fans, we didn't see dropping Arthur Fleck into a vat of acid and turning him white. That wasn't the movie we're making. We just wanted to make something that felt grounded in a reality.
What's so funny? Freak?
It's a wonderful exploration to take probably the most famous two-dimensional villain who we've watched just wreak havoc in so many forms, whether it's the comic book, a television series, or various films, to say, okay, what happens if we humanize this person? And let's see what could be the possible causes.
We talked a lot about who would he be and why is he like this and what is his thing and where does that laugh come from and why does he wear makeup or not or da-da-da. And we really just started reading a lot about narcissism and ego and things that we think that are kind of baked into our version of Joker. Joker's a narcissist, but he's an egoless narcissist in our mind. You know, the ego is Arthur. The ego is the thing that's trying to control this wild horse that is Joker. But Joker is pure id. So we just thought, well, what happens when you go through your life wearing a mask, which a lot of people do. You're wearing a mask and you're pretending to be a certain way, and Arthur is very kind of controlled. But there are these glimpses of who he is underneath. And what happens when you take the mask off, which is kind of a weird flip because actually Joker wears a mask, but the idea, or makeup, but the idea is what happens when you stop living that life and live as the shadow. And then you just make the movie and you forget all that. And you just make the film and you hope it makes sense on some level. We purposely set the movie in the past to kind of remove it from anything else anybody knows. And it's not really even set in the past, it's sort of set in an alternate universe in a way. Even though we don't really say when and where the movie takes place, in my mind, it was always New York City, 1981. What did that look like and what did that feel like? From my memory of it, I mean, I was only 11 or 12 years old, but my memory of it was kind of what you see in the movie, a very kind of run-down, broken-down city on every level. And that was exciting to us as a place to put this character and a place to sort of explore. So that's the Gotham that we built. Mark Friedberg, our production designer, grew up on the Upper West Side his whole life. He remembers 1981 New York as a very specific time.
1981 is the year I left New York to go to college, and it was a rough place. It was dirty, dysfunctional. Every city agency was on strike at some point. The garbage was everywhere, and the city agencies that weren't on strike were corrupt. It was a time that it felt like the social contract was coming apart.
So when we introduce the city, which is a character in the movie, the city feels on the edge like a powder keg.
New York is also a city of realms. And so I wanted there to be distinction between where Arthur goes to work, where Arthur goes to a comedy club, where Arthur goes to a hospital, what's in his neighborhood, what's out of his neighborhood. On some level, those are distinguished simply by the architecture of the city. On some level, they were distinguished by how we dealt with garbage. There was the garbage of the neighborhoods, the garbage of the municipal centers, the garbage of the wealthy neighborhoods, and each had actual design to it. So we did lay out a city. It's a city of bridges and islands. It relates to the Gotham of the comic books, and we tried to relate New York to it. So everything is a riff on something, and we were kind of unriffing it back into New York and then re-riffing it back into our version of Gotham. And in fact, we actually made a map. It helps us understand Arthur's trip, why he gets on the bus, why he gets on the subway, where he lives relative to the places he travels to and where he goes. Where's Ha-Ha's? Where's Wayne Hall? Where are these places? And you may see it actually at the subway stations. We actually have a transit version of that map.
We shot all over the Bronx and Brooklyn, and we shot a little bit in Newark, New Jersey, bringing Gotham to life.
This film opens in what we call Gotham Square, which is clearly an analogy to Times Square, which was once the heartbeat of the city, and by the time of this story was the most nefarious neighborhood of the city. But we were challenged to try and find that city. We actually ended up having to go to Newark, which has been a blighted city, which is on the rebound. But there's the last little bit of it, right in the heart of it, that really tastes of the original New York with the scale, the architecture, and the grit. So that's where we chose to make our Gotham Square.
There's a concerted effort to try and get as much on camera as possible. Todd and Mark have tried to fill out the world around the actors so that they can actually see it. And where the camera can't reach, that's where VFX takes over.
It's hard. New York's been shot so much, but even when they were in a place that has been shot, we're making it look unique to our Gotham.
It's using New York City as Gotham, but you have to take away the things that are particularly iconic about New York City. And so we're swapping out some buildings and making things look dreary, weather-worn, tired. It's creating this background that you always feel but never look at.
The absolute best visual decision we made was where Arthur's neighborhood was. I set Arthur in Brownsville initially, which is the toughest of the tough of our neighborhoods here in New York. We put him in a quasi-project, not the straight-up projects that look the same everywhere, but a version of that, in a taller, bigger building where he would be more anonymous. We liked it, and we lived with it for a long time, but one thing bugged Todd about it, and it was the lack of topography, that it's flat. Todd's idea was to set Arthur in the South Bronx. Not the Fort Apache South Bronx, but the hilly South Bronx, one where he's trudging up public stairways and through alleys and in non-grid-like streets. And it confuses his world in a good way. So it added a real character to where Arthur lives and to our Gotham. People don't think of hills when they think of New York.
The world Todd created with Mark and everybody else was incredible. And the score, I have to say, is also indelible. The score is incredible. It almost feels like that's what you heard if you were walking down the streets of Gotham in 1981. You know, it's not apart from the film, it's part of it.
I started writing the music just after reading the script. So I just started playing the cello a bit, which is my main instrument, and just played around with some melodies and some feelings, and I kind of sat with it for a few hours, and then I was actually kind of just like practicing something else, and then I kind of stumbled onto what became the main theme afterwards. It was just like a really strong feeling of almost like something clicking into place, because it just connected with exactly the same feeling that I had when I read the script, and I was like, you know, so I caught my breath, and then I was just like, okay, and just started recording, and that's kind of where the main theme was born, out of this feeling. Like, this is how he feels, you know, this is what this feels like.
For my whole life, I didn't know if I even really existed. But I do.
Every time I've ever written a movie, I always have to write it with an actor in mind. It really just helps fuel the writing. So I really specifically wrote for Joaquin Phoenix.
I remember Todd sent me a drawing of Joker in the subway, and it looked just like Joaquin Phoenix. He said, yeah, I just keep getting him, I can't get him out of my head. And this is years ago.
What I like about Joaquin is his unpredictability. He's playing jazz while other people are doing math. He's just doing his own thing. I feel like that's very much what we saw the character of Arthur/Joker as. And I just thought, boy, if we get him, we could really do something special.
For me, when I work with a director, I just want somebody that has a singular vision and a really unique take on the material. And it was clear based on Todd's screenplay that he had a real sensitivity to the challenges that Arthur is going through. He felt things in a way that I hadn't expected.
Joaquin certainly had a ton of questions, and I think he also had the same thing I have, which is this fear. This is a big thing to take on. This isn't going to be a small little anonymous film. The Joker's been interpreted and done so many times over the years, and I think there hasn't been a bad one yet. So there's a certain fear. I love that fear. I kind of turned it into adrenaline, and you just go and make the movie. But I think a lot of it was just us talking through that stuff. And then I'm sure he had his own reservations about having never worked with me and all these other things. It just becomes a process of getting to know each other. And I think we spent a few months doing that before he said he would do it.